Hello everyone, welcome back to Valley of the Mist Block of the Month. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And this is our April 2025 Block of the Month. And it's a block we call House on a Hill, even though it looks a little like a house on a cliff. But this block, if you're doing them for the Guild, they're due at the May meeting. So Shelley's going to talk about fabric.
Okay, so our focus fabric this year for each block, if you're going to turn it in each month, is called Poppies Tie Dye, and it's by Island Batik. And we have that for sale at the meeting. Okay, if you aren't turning it in, you can use any fabric you want. And this is always going to be for the door. Okay, so our door fabric this month is going to be 1.5 by 2.5 inches. Then the sky, we're going to have two pieces that are 1.5 by 3 inches, and those go by the chimney. Then there's one piece that is 2 7/8 inch square, and that's for making the roof. Then there's one 2.5 inch square, and that goes by what we're calling the low part of the hill, I guess we'd say.
Yeah, right down here.
And then there's one 2.5 by 4.5, and that's mid part of the hill. And there's one that's 2.5 by 6.5 for the top part of the hill. Then there's one more piece that's a 6.5 inch square. That goes up at the top, and we're going to call that an adjusting piece. Then for the house, we have two pieces that are 1.5 by 3 inches, and that goes under the window.
I'm almost there. Peeling stuff apart.
Should I go slower?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Then two pieces that are 1.5 inch squares, and that's for the wall by the window. Then there's one 1.5 inch by 6.5 inch, and that's for on top. And then there's two pieces that are 1.5 by 1 inch, and they're on either side of the door. Then we have two
and I just want to point out, keep that in mind, that door section by the windows, they're smaller next to the door. The smaller pieces go by the door side of the window.
Okay. And then there's two window pieces, and they're 1.5 inch squares. Then there's a chimney that's 1.5 inch square, which you can have chimney and roof the same color, but you don't have to.
Yeah, we did it the same.
And then there's roof that is 1 2 7/8 inch square, and that's for making on the roof.
So that's the other part of. It's going to be made into a half square triangle.
Right. And then there's one 2.5 inch square, and that goes kind of in the middle part.
And we aren't listing that as adjusting, but if your half square triangles come out small, we would suggest you adjust that wider if your roof is coming out too narrow.
And then we have ground, which is, I guess you'd say, the hill.
Right.
So there's
and I made mine. We both made ours green, like a. But here in Southern California, a lot of hills are brown, or they're lavender covered, or whatever. So, yeah. Do whatever color you want.
Right. So there's one piece that's 2.5 inches by 8.5 inches, and one piece that's 2.5 by 10.5, and one that's 2.5 by 12.5.
And you can make those. Oh, Shelley made hers all the same color. I made mine different. It's up to you. I'm just, when we talked about the adjusting size of this block, it really comes out when you're making it. There's two halves to the block. And the top half is 6.5 inch tall, and the bottom half is 6.5. So this square will adjust like the height of the top half. But if the bottom half is coming out small, you're really going to have to check your seams, because those are 2.5 inch wide strips that 3 of them should make a 6.5 inch piece. So
otherwise you'd have to adjust.
We'd have to adjust every one of them.
Yeah.
So that's just going to be you doing seam management, I think. Okay. So a couple other things I want to go over before we proceed. Remember, this year we're sewing with a scant 1/4 inch seam. If we don't mention pressing, then just press how it kind of wants to go. If we do mention pressing, then follow it, hopefully. And I think that was it that matters about this block. Only other thing is that, we're telling you, like on these ones, I have some extra 2.5 inch strips from a jelly roll that I'm using like for my ground, and that makes those work really good for that, because you know, they're just 2.5 inch wide. But otherwise, I'd recommend that you don't cut pieces out of your fabric so much as cut strips of your fabric, maybe by the smaller width, except for with the focus fabric. The focus fabric, just cut out what you need of the door. Okay, so let's take all this off of here that we don't need right now, because we're going to start, we're going to do this kind of in sections, and the first section we're going to make is the roof of the house. So we will complete the whole top part of the quilt before we do the hill. And really the only kind of tricky part at all is the hill, and it's pretty easy. It's they're just kind of like flippy corners, but they're kind of weird flippy corners. So we'll go over that when we get there. So the first thing we're going to do is make, like I said, the house, and we're going to make the roof. So you're going to sew. So pull everything off of here. I'm ready. Okay, here's my chimney.
There's lots of pieces, as you know.
Yeah, hard. There's like 23 pieces in this block, and we're going to try to get rid of. We're going to try to sew a bunch of these together just to make it easier for you. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew one of these white strips on either side of the chimney, and press them, and then you're going to take your 2 7/8 inch pieces, the two that match. And we've got a video on making half square triangles if you're not comfortable with that. It's called half squared. But basically, I like to sew a line down the diagonal. Shelley likes to sew a 1/4 inch line either side of the diagonal. I mean, draw a 1/4 inch line either side of the diagonal, and that is her sewing line. Mine is just a guideline of how far away to sew. So we're going to make these 2 half square triangles, which are either side of the roof. And if you want to trim them, they should be 2.5 inches square when they're done. And that way they'll match up with this center block. So you're going to make your half square triangles, angle them like a roof. That seems pretty obvious. And then sew that strip together and sew it to the chimney. And so when we'll come back, we'll have the chimney and roof completed.
Right.
And I'm not sure the size, but I'll tell you that when we come back. So our roof is done. That was pretty easy.
Yes.
And now we're going to do the house part next. And we're going to do this in 2 steps. So the first step, you're going to sew these small house pieces to either side of the window. And you can orient them correctly if you want, or you can do them exactly the same and you just flip it over. But remember, one of these in the end, you know, the small pieces go to the inside of the window. So then after we do that, these ones, it doesn't really matter. I think I pressed them to the window. It really doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to take that away. I don't even care. Then after you're done with that, sew those together, press it, and you're going to add this bottom piece under the window. At this point, you do have to make sure you have them oriented correctly. So you have, they'll be opposite of each other.
Right.
But the piece goes under the window. And then we'll come back. Oh, I forgot to mention, I did say I would tell you the size of this. It should be 3.5 inches by 6.5 when it's completed. So that kind of means to me, this house piece is also going to end up being 3.5 inches.
I think you're probably right.
we did this very symmetrical, just like we like.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We've hopefully sewn these pieces to the right side of the window, correct side of the window. Shelley, what do we do next?
Okay, next thing is you want to sew those pieces to either side of the door. Make sure your skinnier part by the window is next to the door. And then after you've done that,
And press it.
right, and press it, sew the top onto there.
Shelley, why did you use a blue background?
Well, because you told me to.
No, you had a blue, because we were looking at your
I
yellow
know.
one up there before.
I know.
She switched colors on us.
Well,
I did the same.
You're right, I did.
Okay, so
And then after that, when you have your house done, sew the roof on it. Okay?
press that.
And then one more step. We're going to sew this onto what would be the left side of the house.
Yes.
Adriane, think about that.
I have a very tough time with writing that. Okay, and when you're done, that entire top half should be 12.5 by 6.5.
So half the block will be done.
And the other half,
oh my gosh,
it's
so
easy.
easy.
It's very, it looks a little complicated, but it's actually very easy.
Yes.
All right, so we'll be back with our top half completed, and then we will make the hill, and we'll be almost done.
Yes.
Okay, so we have our house portion completed. I realize it looks like it's on the bottom of the hill. We will fix that after this. Okay, so let's talk about making the hill. Now, I don't know if you guys were super observant, but Shelly's sample block, you might have seen some extra pieces. Because when we first were doing this, we did it with just flippy corners. And then we realized we can do it in one piece and save you a seam. So her first one there, she has just flippy corners on the end of these pieces.
Right.
And we're still going to do that. We're going to do that with this piece, with this last one here, the longest, because that's all we need is a corner. And I don't know if you remember, but basically you sew a line on the diagonal, and in this case, you know, watch your orientation. I guess if you do it wrong, it'd be right on the other end, and you have to flip it over.
This is super important to watch how you've laid these.
Right.
Because I think we both did it wrong at one point.
Well, I drew the line wrong, and okay,
Yeah.
so and then you're going to sew to the top side, just one thread to the top side of the line you draw, and then you're going to pull it up, make sure it looks like it fits. When it does, you're going to lay it back down, trim this to 1/4 inch, and then press it. Okay? So, and this one I would recommend you press to the darker, just because you can. Press to how it wants to go. It doesn't really matter. So now the second one, Shelly, the second two are the same way.
Right.
And Shelly's got hers laying up there, kind of showing how it orients.
Right.
And to mine, I've got this piece here, and I'm going to take, so it's the middle piece, so I take the middle piece of white, and I'm going to lay it at this 90-degree angle. And mine, I have a line drawn on it, and you're going to say, well, how do I know where to draw the line? Well, we're going to look at Shelly's, because I don't know if you can see, there's a little purple dot, and she took a ruler, you know, a little ruler, and she measured when it was laying in this orientation, laid it and measured 2.5 inches down and made a dot right there.
Right.
And then the next step she's going to do, she's going to take this ruler and she's going to go from that dot to that top corner and draw her line.
Right.
And that's exactly what you need. And you can do the same thing with the other one. And you have to make sure that it's oriented correctly, that when you draw that dot, you're drawing it on the wrong side of the fabric and it's laying, you know, like this, and you're going to draw the line down on the right, on the left, on the left.
You start at the top and go
on the
from right
left
to
side of the piece. You're going to go down 2.5 inches, and then you're going to go from that up to the top right corner.
Right.
Okay, and then you're going to sew them on exactly the same way as you did this little flippy corner, and you're going to check to make sure it fits, and it should. And it look at that, it makes a perfect little strip. And they all are just because of the length of the strips, they all work out and they line up when you sew them together.
Right.
So make all 3, then sew the 3 together in the right order, and then sew to the top of your house, and you should have a 12.5 inch block.
And the hill piece should be, again, 6.5 by 12.5.
Right.
Before you sew it to the top.
Right. And I would definitely check that you are doing okay before you sew on the last piece.
You can always adjust your seam width if you need to do that.
Right. Yeah. You can sew a little scanter seam to make it a little bigger, or if the whole thing is a little bit small, you can sew a scanter seam when you sew the 2 together, the top and the bottom.
Right.
But they should be 12.5 inches long. All right, so we're going to come back with our finished block. All right, we finished our houses. Our houses on a cliff. I mean, on a hill. House on a hill. So that one went pretty well. I think it's pretty cool how these just went in line.
Right.
And remember, if you're checking your sizes, starts at 2.5, the next chunk would be 4.5, and then when you have the whole thing, it was 6.5.
Right.
But it went together really good.
It did.
Looks great. And we will be back here in May with your next house. I think we're going to do a fun one again, even though we've enjoyed doing all of these so
Yes.
far. All right, see you back here in May.